Greetings, Vault Hunters, and welcome to Echoes from the Borderlands, the podcast where we explore the iconic Borderlands franchise through conversations with the writers, devs, artists, and others who are responsible for its creation and success. I'm your host, Joel Watson, and today we're talking about how the best things always come in threes. Back to the Future movies, celebrity deaths, and Borderlands games. If you don't count the pre-sequel Tales, New Tales, or Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, it's just three Borderlands 3. I'm joined by Senior Project Producer Chris Brock, Mission Designer Kate Pitstick, and Art Director Scott Kester. Welcome! Borderlands 3 is the fourth main game in the Borderlands series. That's not how numbers work, but whatever. It was released September 13th, 2019 for PS4, Xbox One, and PC. More than 5 million copies sold in 5 days. 8 million by the end of 2019, 15 million by May of 22, over 18 million by 2023. It's set 7 years after the events of Borderlands 2. We have 4 new Vault Hunters who join Lilith's Crimson Raiders on a mission to shut down a dangerous cult and their leaders, the Calypso Twins. Let's talk about how we get between Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 3. Borderlands 3 development was one of the first projects at Gearbox new headquarters in Frisco, Texas, right?
Yeah.
That sound correct?
Yeah, it was like probably the first one that we did like from start to scratch in the building, right? Yeah.
Yep. And it was also the first project developed jointly with Gearbox Studios Quebec.
Yes.
Yeah.
That studio opened in December of 2015, but this was one of their first main projects. What was it like working closely with another Gearbox studio on a mainline Borderlands game?
Oh man, it ended up being great, but it was also not originally the plan.
Right.
I actually remember pretty clearly. Randy called me up into his office, and we were talking about we're probably going to have to push the game back a little bit. It probably wasn't going to hit its date. And he's like, well, it sounds like we need more horsepower on it. I was like, yeah, totally. But, I don't know what we're going to do. He's like, well, we have this Quebec studio. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Yeah, let's get them on board too. That'd be fun. He's like, I'm going to talk to them tomorrow, and we're going to have them start on Monday. And at the time, I want to say GSQ was it's like 45 or 50 people. They're going to be coming to join the team. And I don't know if anybody listening to this would like kind of understand, but like having 50 people join your creatively driven project the next day is a pretty big deal, and that's not a lot of time to like kind of lay the groundwork for them joining. But they did, and they were super gracious and patient with us while we kind of got them onboarded, and they did great. It was awesome.
They also worked on DLC 4 for Borderlands 2, which was co-developed, right? Roughly the same timeline as Borderlands 3?
Yeah. So, they did the first and the fourth DLCs for Borderlands 3.
And that DLC 4, which was Commander Lilith and the fight for Sanctuary, bridges the story between Tales 2, Tales, and then gets us to 3.
Mm-hmm.
I was also told that it came out in June of 2019, while we were doing press for Borderlands 3. So that's like a lot going on at once.
Yeah, it was a lot going on at once. Yeah, for sure.
Do you have any particular memories of that sort of? Was that the home stretch, or was that?
So usually you're kind of on the downhill slope when you're that close to release, and by that point, like we were all doing like press stuff, right? Yeah. I mean, like we had done the announce, like we did the PAX announce. We're like, hey, there's a Borderlands 3, and then we did the LA event in May, I think, where we kind of did the blowout. Like, here's the game. But then from that May event through launch, we were pretty much either taking care of something mission critical back at the studio, or we were like on the road talking about the game. It felt like.
Well, I think it's also kind of unprecedented to do a DLC for a 7-year-old game.
Yes. I remember when it was first pitched, I was like, man, I've never heard of that. That feels really ambitious. That's way more than we have to do, right? And
nothing's too good for our fans.
Well, but it was cool though, right? It was one of those things where it's like you think about it more. It's like, it's cool you've never heard of that. It's cool that like we're doing that when you don't have to. It's kind of like we have I like to think we have a good reputation for our DLCs for a reason. Like we tend to over-deliver on them, especially for the Borderlands games.
We've talked with our live ops people on this podcast about just how we support games after launch and how it kind of does go over above and beyond.
Yeah,
always.
For sure.
Let's talk about goals for the project. Scott, did you have a particular vision for the art of Borderlands 3, and how might it have differed from the previous games?
Well, I think early on we knew we were going to go broader. It was going to be bigger. It was going to go to different locations. So I think for me, some of it is refinement of technique and stuff, but that's probably boring to what most people want to hear.
Right.
So there was that, but for me it was, we're gonna make a city, we're gonna make a forested environment, and that was kind of like, ugh, we can't do that.
A game that's historically a desert or a desert adjacent or a rocky moon, which is kind of a desert.
Yeah. So I think that was my biggest goal going into this, was to get that variety. I mean, pretty early on, we knew we were going to leave Pandora, and that was I was like, well, I take that like we really want to make sure that, like, all right, if we're going to leave a place that's so well known, we have to put that much effort into each place we go to.
Did it have to feel earned, or you just wanted to do it justice?
I wanted to do it justice. Like Promethea was it was very hard to make. Like, it's extremely hard to make, given the architecture, the limitations, the guns that are in memory, all the things that are going against us to pull those things off, and lots of trees and all that kind of stuff too with Eden 6. So I think that was kind of my goal early on, and it was the mission we were given, right? It was to expand, like, let's tell stories on other places. Let's build the universe. Like, we built the world, let's build the universe. Obviously, you had tales and other things that talked about other places.
Did you feel like Pandora set the precedent for sort of the guidelines for what your universe was, or did you want to expand beyond it?
I wanted to expand, because you can't, like, all right, I'm in a city, you can't just put a pile of scrap metal and write, piss off, like everywhere. Like, but it was funny though, because a lot of the way we built the environment though was very similar, because we're sitting here trying to make these, I'll use Promethea, we're trying to build the city, and everyone's like, we can't build a city. And I'm like, the buildings are just rocks.
Yeah. Right.
And people were like, oh,
yeah.
Like, they
reframing
are.
it,
They're
reframing it that way.
We're just painting. We're painting rocks real pretty.
Do you feel Do you feel like when you tell a team of artists, "Hey, we got to make a city," they're going, windows, desks, lobbies.
Yeah. Can I go inside?
Ferns.
Right. Yeah.
The goal is always to sell as much of it as you can with as little as possible.
Sure.
And I don't mean that negatively. I mean that in an efficient way, because you can't go in everything. You can't do everything. So it was kind of like, what can we do that can convince somebody that this is not just a desert, but it's sort of built like a desert, but it's not.
That's interesting, because part of your job, part of all of our jobs is efficiency, and that's a solve, right? That's a big problem with a kind of an obvious solution when you reframe it that way. Kate, what did you like about previous Borderlands missions, and what did you hope to bring into Borderlands 3?
Oh, that's a tough one.
I'm putting your feet to the fire. I asked the hard questions.
I like the whimsy. I think one of the things that Borderlands has a lot of, just across all the titles, is this funny humor that's steeped in fairly serious topics at times, and can take itself seriously and not at the same time. Like, it's a really weird paradox almost that...
There's if I didn't laugh, I'd be crying tone to Borderlands.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, like, you get the broad expanse of, like, Face McShooty, which I know Anthony was on here talking about before. But then you get, these moments like, oh, what's a good moment? Like, I don't want to say the Lilith Maya moment, or who did we kill? I don't remember.
Who did we kill?
Who did we kill?
We killed Maya.
Maya.
Lilith is ambiguous.
I mean, just throwing everyone out the window in this game, so it's fine. It's fine. But, like, having these moments too where we can address more serious topics along with our funny poop joke humor.
Right.
So I am kind of a monster with my mission designs. Like, I had a idea I just wanted to make a really short mission that was going to be a little shock surprise ending. And Connor McCleary, one of our other writers at the time, came back and he's like, hey, what if we hurt people more? And that evolved into the birthday side mission.
We're going to get to that one.
Ooh,
I'm
okay.
saving that. I've got a whole section for the birthday.
A whole section?
I mean, I got a bullet point. I got a bullet point for the birthday, because you're not off the hook by any means, but we're not gonna blow that in the first 5 minutes of the podcast.
I already said I'm a monster. I already admitted it.
Scott, how did you stay true to the super iconic, recognizable Borderlands art style, but offer fans something fresh. I feel like that's at least the goal, right?
Yeah, it is. It is challenging because I think a lot of people associate, the terrain itself is Borderlands, but I think for us, we have to like we're looking at it in spaces, and it's recognizable shapes and strong silhouettes and these things, and there's obviously the inking that's applied to it. But to me, it's more of kind of a mindset of how you approach these things, right? If it's like, for instance, we knew we had all these kind of like graffitied signs in Pandora that were very simplistic and very crude and kind of representative of that. So when I think about a place like Eden 6, I was like, hey, all the signage should be hand painted, like artisan craftsman, like, right? And like, those are things that are felt, but not really, they're seen, but they're felt like in the back of your head.
Sure.
They're not really like somebody going, wow, look at the Peaches sign, Well, maybe somebody is like me, but like
It's on a wiki somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
So, but I think it's in breaking down. You have a space, and you have the people that live in it, and you have how they're represented in it, and what their signage is. And I think signage is a secret weapon of Borderlands because it's super simple things there. It's like the Eden 6, and then Promethea was like, hey, everything is clean. It's very like projected. It's what I call Designer's Republic,
Right.
like stylistic, like high design, like early 2000s design. Sorry, I'm getting real. Don't. No one ever ask me about art stuff because I will go down wells and I won't come back. But like, but I think it's more of the mindset about like, representing. Like we look at our world through the people in it and the topography and the signage inside of it.
The interesting thing to me about that, when you say the signage and the people in it, the signage tells you about other people that aren't there.
Yes.
It informs you who was here.
All games are a magic trick because you can't sell a whole city, right?
Right.
So you've got to convey that like, oh, it's been evacuated. The signs say like evacuation, but you can see the remnants of humanity. So your brain fills those things in. So I think, as Randy would always be so clever to say, it's all about showmanship, and it's
Sure.
kind of like the magic of what you don't have to show,
Right.
And that's what we really have to. You always have to lean on. Any game developer does, obviously. So,
Chris, we've had a lot of people on the show of different disciplines that I feel like the general public, the general fan of Borderlands and of video games in general has an idea
Sure.
of what an artist is, a writer is.
Right.
I feel like project producers.
What's a producer do?
What's a project producer?
What do
or,
you do?
Or on a Borderlands game, what's a project producer do?
I think just kind of generally speaking, a producer, like if we think of like a creative director, like that's the person who decides like, what is this game going to be? What's the experience supposed to be? And Scott, as an art director, like, what is this game going to look like? The producer's job is like, how are we going to make this game happen? Like, how are we going to get it done? And so it's a lot of scheduling, budgeting, project management,
Spreadsheets,
stuff.
man.
So there is a
Spreadsheets.
lot of the spreadsheets. But honestly, like to get to your second part of your question with the Borderlands part, like Borderlands games are difficult to make in the sense that, like from a mechanical standpoint, there's a ton of systems that go into play, right? And they all kind of have to be there for you to feel it, right? From a style standpoint, it's really tough because like you can tell people to like go make art assets, but like as Scott has said a lot of times, like the soul of it is in like the funk, right? Like how is it that you how do you make this feel like Borderlands? And so a lot of the job for the producer is rushing the team to something that feels like Borderlands, so that you can like point back at it and replicate it a bunch of times.
Do you feel like it's? Are you sort of in charge, the shepherd of the big picture?
Yes, that would be a good way to put it. Yeah. So like kind of one of our kind of I thought like watershed moments on the game was when we were working on the run up to Mouthpiece, right? Like we were kind of like working on a demo, and like that was a great way to like here's the tone of the mission we're going to. Here is what like Tyrene's going to be saying to you as you go up, and like it just kind of helped paint a picture for like the attitude that we're going for, and just so getting the team to that point as fast as possible is what we try to do.
Is it if we can get the developers to make this, now they will understand the goal?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So like it almost takes making it once to know what you're supposed to make. And then you make it again. And
rinse
like,
and repeat.
You're right.
So you've never had a cake, you bake one and then you taste it and you go, I get
cake's
cake.
amazing.
Yeah, okay,
and now I have to go make a lot of cake.
I get cake.
And
now.
then, like 5-6 years from now, you make another Borderlands game and you have to redefine what cake means, right? Because the studio has grown, times have changed in some ways, both like what games are doing and what like, culturally, like what the tone should be,
Sure.
right? So like, you have to find Borderlands for every Borderlands.
Was Borderlands 3 anyone's first Borderlands game as a dev?
Mine.
Tell me, what was it like? Okay, A, were you approaching it as a fan? B, what was it like approaching a well-established franchise? I would feel like I was going to break everything.
I mean, so I had played them before. I wouldn't necessarily say as a fan. That's going to sound weird. But my friends were here, so I liked working with my friends. So that's really why I wanted to come to Gearbox. Everyone talked like how much they loved it being here, and how they liked working on the project. So when I joined at the time, Gearbox was still working on Battleborn, and I had just come from Gigantic prior to that, and from Paladins prior to that. So, that was really my starting wheelhouse, was the shooter aspect in terms of MOBAs and PvP.
Did that ease you into Borderlands a bit?
It did, actually. I think being able to start out working with the people on something that wasn't like their baby in terms of here were previous expectations.
Right.
I was able to be a little bit more flexible with my designs, whereas starting on Borderlands, it was going back and replaying games that I hadn't played in several years. So kind of relearning with everyone else at the time, what is Borderlands and how do we make that feel similar for the franchise and unique for a whole new generation of players.
Do you feel like that gave you sort of an outsider perspective? Like, you're coming into a lot of people's fourth or fifth Borderlands project. They've probably got some preconceived notions about what the franchise is. Did you find yourself not experiencing those preconceived notions, or?
Not necessarily. I think because there had been so much time between projects and then so much variety, like the pre-sequel from Tales, from Borderlands 2 even, there was already a lot of variety there, and several developers had, worked on one, but maybe not some of the others. So there wasn't really, for me, a lot of pressure or any of that.
That's interesting, because I feel like actually I could probably answer my own question, because everybody I've talked to on this show, no one wants to do the same thing that's already been done. Yep. It's boring.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk about our setting. Scott, you'd already mentioned that one of the main goals was not just getting off Pandora, but getting somewhere else unique. Borderlands is on Pandora. BL2 has slightly different regions and environments on Pandora. Pre-sequel explores the moon, Elpis. Borderlands 3, we've now got unique worlds with unique biomes. We're getting out and about. The spoke of the game has expanded to these various regions. What did you want to see in the look of those worlds, and how do you think that would translate to a unique experience for the player?
Well, obviously, if you had experienced the other Borderlands games, you had a pretty good understanding of Pandora. I worked on 1 and 2 and 3, so I lived through all this, and I was always somebody that was pushing. This, again, like we said, you want to have familiarity, but you want to push people into new experiences, right? So, I was always like, oh, let's put robots in, let's fight mechs, and I remember, one little non sequitur, well, maybe not, whatever. In Borderlands 1, it was like we were doing the General Knox DLC. I'm like, I'm putting mechs in this, and they're like, we don't put mechs in Borderlands. I was like, we're putting mechs in that.
Yeah.
But because
more robots.
Yeah, because we put mech. I remember it was like, hey, we want this business guy in a suit with suitcases that come out like Ghost in the Shell, and they shoot at you for Crimson Lance. And I was like, I'm gonna draw a ninja with swords, and and we were like, oh, that's cooler. So we did that, and we did robots. But those things were segues, right, to Borderlands 2 and into Borderlands 3. So when I think about Borderlands 3, it was like everything was important. Like Promethea was important because of its biome, how it looked, how the sky felt, how it looked, what that skybox looked like, how Eden 6 was the same way. So I think you have things that you love. Like, obviously, I'm a huge Akira fan, and I'm like, well, I want to get this Neo Tokyo vibe, but make it ours and put this into this. And also I was like, man, a lot of games don't deal with deep south bayou
Right.
kind of stuff. So I thought
I felt
that would
very
be
at
cool.
home there.
Yes. Well, and I thought that was cool because it just is something we hadn't really done as a studio. And I think for me, it was the challenge to the team. It was the challenge for development because all that was challenging. But I think that it was just getting, a familiarity and something you like with we're really lucky that there's a very distinct art style to Borderlands. And I just think it was proving that art style can exist outside of these places that we know of, and it can be attributed to clean surfaces too, and more organic surfaces as well.
Yeah,
So.
Eden 6 is almost the anti-Pandora in a lot of ways.
It's funny you say that because that was sort of the way that I would pitch it, which would kind of make the team go, well, why are we doing this? And I think it was. I mean, I think even Randy at the beginning was like, we're going to go like 20 planets. And I was like, whoa there, buddy. Because what I didn't want to do, and I don't want to point the finger at things, I didn't want to just make like blue sand planet or like red sand planet. I wanted it to, if you went there, I mean, even in Athenas or whatever, it's like, wow, we basically made enough assets to make an entire game out of it. And it's like one section, basically.
Right.
But that was kind of that commitment to that. Like, you feel different there. The color is different. The world is different. You understand there's a civilization that was kind of there.
There's a thing that happens when you get attacked by bandits on Pandora, you're like, yep, makes sense.
Yeah.
When there's firefight on Eden 6, you're like, whoa, there's like nice old stuff here. Please, guys, don't shoot.
Yeah.
You're gonna blow up all the temples. Like, calm down. Was there a mandate to go bigger, or is that just the next logical step?
I think there was a mandate to we need to expand the universe some. It needs to feel larger, and that's where the way to do that would be to leave Pandora. As Scott said, we kind of tapped Pandora out. I'm sure we could do more there, but we've already kind of diversified the biomes there. There's only so much we can do without kind of betraying what Pandora is. So now we got to go other places.
Right. From a mission design standpoint, each of these planets. Not all of them, but some of them, it's like go to a planet, meet a familiar NPC. They'll guide you to the next thing. How did that impact mission design, having these familiar faces?
Well, I mean, so I was handed a mission for Eden 6, which wound up being the prison mission. And that was overwhelming because not only am I new to the Borderlands franchise working on it, I'd been in the industry for almost 10 years at that point. But all of a sudden now they're like, okay, we need you to introduce Hammerlock and Wainwright and Tina and Brick. And Mordecai and the Bird. And at that point, Gage and Death Trap was also in there. And I was like, so this is like a new title card every 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Well, and by the way, in BL1, you were by yourself pretty much all the time. And in BL2, you sometimes had a person with you. And in this one, it's like, okay, this is 6-7 characters that we're putting in the critical path of the mission.
But
not
they're
only
not.
that,
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, not only that, but you have to give them enough time where you understand who that individual is and why they're important to the story too. So was.
And you can't rely that everybody doesn't know who's these characters.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of new players, right?
And that's the thing I think Randy said, and I think we always kind of would try to say is this could always be someone's first game.
Right.
Right. And we can't just depend that they know what all this stuff is.
You shouldn't expect applause every time a familiar face shows up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that is kind of a thing we do. We bring all these characters back because we have a lot of cool characters and they've got fans.
Did it feel like a chance to marry a character with a suitable environment? I think Wainwright and Space Florida, Space Louisiana is a really nice melding of character and environment.
Yeah. No, I think that's what's fun, right? It's what we said before is the character that belongs in this place. What always bothers me is when there's there's a super pristine character that's in a squalor in a game and you're like, well, you're not a product of this place. And I think the stories in Borderlands are not always told, but they're felt. And I think that's important that everything kind of has a place.
Hinted at. A lot of stuff is hinted at.
Yeah, it's hinted at. Everything's, even if it's clean, it's a little grimy. There's something sketchy around the corner almost all the time. So
also, they never betray what I consider a core Borderlands franchise pillar of an NPC's got a problem and they just don't want to solve it.
Sure, yeah.
So like, can you just
No
do
one can-
it?
no one
Just
can
do it
fix
for
their
me.
own life.
Please
Yeah,
just
yeah.
get a gun and fix it for me. God, I'm so tired of problems. And I sympathize. That feels real. Kate, in terms of the multiple planets in mission design, how does the mission design team look at the whole thing? Like, is the game's mission map, hey, we start here, then planet, then back, and then planet, and then back? Or is that something producers do to manage that? Because I know you're on an individual planet making an individual mission. Who's managing that overall arc?
So it was a lot of interaction between the narrative team and the mission team. Narrative had the broader story book, right? And then they divided up into smaller chapters, and the mission team takes those chapters and then figures out how to make that be interactive.
So it just gets more and more granular. And then somebody, I assume you maybe, has to look at the whole thing and go, this makes sense.
The director level group has to look at it, make sure it makes sense. Yeah, so I don't like decide that, but I'm in charge of making sure it gets decided, if that makes sense.
That's a different spreadsheet.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Color-coded green.
Yeah, so
Scott, how did you approach designing the unique environments from like a research standpoint? Did you just think, hey, forest, swamp, planet, I can figure that out? Or were there specific references or inspirations?
Yeah, I mean, they're for sure. I have a Rolodex of like, I don't know. I wear my heart on my sleeve, obviously, but like at the same time, like we do a lot of research, and what I also like to do is take, like, if I say, hey, this is the high level that we're going to try to do for a place like Eden 6, and I'm working with a concept designer, there's a guy, Adam Ybarra, that did almost all of the conceptual look for that planet and a lot of the game, honestly. And basically, I'm like, look, man, I need some rocks that feel unique, that feel this. We're looking for this, Louisiana kind of thing. And here's some, I'll put generic reference boards together in hand. But he'd be the guy that's like, oh man, I was eating this cheese, and this cheese had this awesome texture, and I put it down, and I started taking pictures of it. And I started drawing over it, and like all of the rocks in Eden 6 are derived from a kind of cheese. Yeah. So
Hey, what kind of cheese was it?
I can't remember.
We got to find out.
I could text Adam right now. But
what was the rock cheese on Eden 6?
Yeah, but like that kind of thing is like, you set a high level with the inspiration of like, let's sell this and let's do this. You usually find a few key reference images that look really good, or but then you take it and you say, hey, the person is the master of this kind of thing. Dwell, think about it, look at it, and just see what like where your imagination or where your inspiration takes you. But I mean, Pandora was always easy for me, because whereas most people, their trilogy of choice growing up was Star Wars, mine was Mad Max. And I was raised by a couple Motorheads, and I was around cars, and I was around this kind of thing, and I loved that. So that, like, I could design Pandora. I could design a game for you in like weeks at the high level, right?
Given that, what environment was the most challenging? Because so many things are not like Pandora.
dude, it's got to be city, right?
City, yeah, I think it was challenging to pull out. It wasn't challenging to draw.
Right.
It was
build.
It was challenging to build because. So here's one of the things. A lot of the Kate was talking about Prison. I was talking about Eden 6, and a lot of the unsung heroes in building these places are the raw content artists that build all of these miscellaneous building blocks that allow the artist to do that. And there's just so much like fakery, that is done to convey those things. So like, I mean, I know it's kind of a broken record, but both of those were hard because you have an Eden 6, we just can't put foliage everywhere. It just doesn't render. The outline shader is weird with that. Mm-hmm. Like it creates all sorts of like moire patterns and problems and stuff. Everything's hard. That's what I've found. And like
games is hard.
Everything is hard, but that's why it's fun. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like everything's a challenge. And to me, it was always like we should challenge ourselves because it'll push us to new ground, and it will engage us. If not, like I always joke that this game nearly killed me, and and that's probably true. I mean, Brock, we were part of a lot of conversations about, oh my gosh, this thing, but but if you weren't doing that, then like, what are you doing?
If it's easy, it's not worth it. Yeah.
Like everything is hard, and I welcome that, and I think it should. I guess I like hard games too, but it's like it should be challenging because then you're pushing yourself and you're pushing a team to do that, and I think that we could have taken a lot of easy routes, but even the things we did on Pandora, like. They're a little bigger, they're a little crazier, they're a little harder to do.
Something else we should talk about is that because pre-sequel existed and kind of came between BL2 and BL3, and we were calling this one BL3. Like, we didn't call that one 3, we called it something else. It had a subtitle, right?
Yeah.
So this is 3, and it's got to feel big, and it's got to feel like we really went for it, right? And like, we needed it to feel familiar to Borderlands fans. We couldn't like completely change the formula, but we needed it to feel from like a content, like a narrative perspective to feel like a big deal. Right?
One of the biggest things I think that elevates you, I mean, it sort of services your travel to other planets is we took the city with us.
Sanctuary.
When was the decision made to like bring Sanctuary and all of its weirdos up into space with us?
Oh man, honestly, as early as I can remember, you were going to have Sanctuary was going to be like your kind of traveling base. It just, I think mechanically we just needed it to be.
Yeah,
you needed a spoke or a hub.
We needed
spokes.
you to have all your functions, right?
Yeah,
and like all these characters represent like a gameplay.
You got to have Crazy Earl there.
You got to have Marcus there to sell you some guns, right?
I think it's important in Borderlands in particular to come home. You know, I think it's important to see Firestone or something, right? Because like if all you're doing is trekking forward and never looking back, I think it's the comfort to like after a thing to see that home and you know.
You're right. Not only in seeing it, but it's a feeling of I'm probably not going to have a boss fight on Sanctuary.
Probably
like I'm probably safe to hang out, do some errands.
Sure. Yeah. Thankfully, not a lot of combat on Sanctuary.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about characters for a minute. We bring in 4 new Vault Hunters, Amara the Siren, Flack the Beastmaster, Mose the Gunner, and Zane the Operative. In designing those characters, did you have any favorites?
Zane's my favorite in this game.
Yeah.
For me, yeah. But I love like Solid Snake. I love espionage. I love gadgets and stuff. Like I love like I'm looking at him again and I'm like the spider on his back that's interwoven in. It was total ref from Drive from Ryan Gosling with the
scorpion.
With the scorpion. Yeah. But it's like that to me. Now, granted, I think they're all awesome, and Flack is again one of those. This is just the hobo robo. This is just like the obvious. But like I mean,
I would have bet anything you were going to say Mose. Honestly, I thought like the Tank Girl reference would have given it to Mose.
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's hard. Like I've been so blessed to have a hand in so many of these characters of this franchise. But I think just like the environments, though, I think it was important that we did new things visually and gameplay. Obviously, I'm not the gameplay designer. I just kind of how things would look. So, and I think it was always good to push a new angle.
With Flack in particular, I know that you're saying you fought for mechs, and now we finally got a playable robot character. What sci-fi references do you feel like you pulled from to bring Flack to life?
Zero is probably my favorite character I've ever done, but that's like my ode to Snake Eyes. That's why in this game, allegiance is shifted and it's Storm Shadow because it's in white, because that's what I was obsessed with. That was why I did that. But like, I think to me it was like robots rule, like ambiguous, like is this a robot? Is this a person? Is there this? And so I felt like, and I've always said every game I had an oddity in it. And it was like number 1 was Brick just because he's big and weird and like felt different, right, than that. And then in 2 it was Zero, and then this game it was definitely Flack. So.
Speaking of someone like Brick, how do you feel like you need to keep these recurring characters, Moxie, Brick, Claptrap, updated in the way they look and the way they're presented in each game?
Man, we had some revs of them that changed a lot more initially. Yeah.
Yeah, I got in trouble.
I wasn't going to say that.
Because no, Stephen Ball came down. I was like, Scott, you're taking these too far. But it's like you get to a point where you've lived with them so long, and it's a hard challenge, right? Because there's an allegiance that if you change something too much, the fan is upset. Like I had versions of Moxie that were very
super different.
Very different. She was very queen-like and very clothed and very, I just was like, well, she's elevated to this point where she doesn't need to expose herself necessarily as much anymore. but like, you find kind of the, I don't know how far you can or can't push that. So you want to, I don't know. It's, for as much as I love them, I'm fine with them not being there too. But you kind of start to get this allegiance that, oh man, you got to have Moxie, or you got to have Claptrap. But like, no, let's just not have Claptrap in this.
It's just funny because the instinct is to push them way further, and then we have to
Yeah.
bring them back in because it's too much of a.
What if everyone's lost an eye since the last game?
So
Or
Lilith
like,
looked really different for like early in development. Lilith had she had different hair. And,
Lilith is probably real dramatic. I mean, gosh, you list the amount of people that worked on Lilith in Borderlands 1, and it's like, she changed a lot, and as she evolved through the game, she doesn't change as much. I tried to change her more.
But that's what I'm saying.
this.
Like the early concept for Lilith in BL3 was like really pushed it. And
very different, and we had to walk that back because it just, again, I was told, Scott, your problem is you're just too creative. And that was said lovingly. And that was Stephen Ball, by the way.
Yeah,
so
it
if he's
sounds like
watching
Ball.
this,
That sounds like
but he said it in a way that like, I get it, but we also have to remember it's an IP. There's a franchise. There's a familiarity. And I'm like, you're right. You totally are right. And then you kind of become a custodian of what has been created, but then that's why we keep making new stuff though, so that you can like, show a different kind of character or a different promise or something. So.
Hey, Vault Hunters. Listen, your mom and I, we found some magazines under your bed. Game Informer, EGM, Game Pro. Listen, we're not upset. What you're doing isn't wrong. It's natural to be curious, but we want you to explore that curiosity safely and with guidance. So we've asked Gearbox and 2K to come over to talk to you about the Borderlands collection, Pandoras Box. It's a bundle that contains every Borderlands game to date for one great price, and it's available now on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. It'll let you indulge your new hobby, and you won't have to do it out in the street. Mom and I are going to go for a walk while Gearbox and 2K visit with you. Hear them out, okay? Vault Hunters. Grow up so fast. From each of your perspectives, I know none of you are writers, but everything you do touches the story. Where do you feel your intersection of your discipline and the story comes in? I'm staring at you, Kate.
I feel
like that's- yeah, yeah, I'm like,
I'm going to talk like each of you.
I
We're
feel
going to make eye
Well, I was
contact.
just thinking, you're the closest to having a direct effect on story, because as a mission designer, I feel like there is maybe a misconception that a writer sits down and writes the whole game, probably one person, writes an entire game and everyone gets to work. And it's just nothing like that.
Especially the way we do it, like the narrative team would hand us, as I mentioned earlier, like a chapter, and they would have a goal of like, okay, we need to rescue Tanis here. And it was pretty much up to us, like how that happened. We could figure out, based on context clues of what planet are we on, what's happening around us in the story to build the mission off of. But even then, like there's still influences we could have. I remember fairly late, I think it was in development, where we had this segment of Tanis was captured, and then we had to also get a thing for her. But it was just the order of events was weird, right? Because it was like, okay, but she's being held hostage, but we've really got to get this thing first, right? Like, forget her for now, but you really got to get this thing. Doesn't matter that she's being held captive on Carnivora. Mm-hmm. We got to go get this other thing.
Yeah, she'll be fine.
Yeah.
She's dangling over a spinning blade,
she's
but
okay.
she's fine.
Yeah, she's just on Carnivora getting ready to be sacrificed for a whole another pop mission. And eventually I was like, what if we just like flopped?
Switched them.
Switched those two. Yeah. And there was a moment of like, oh, yeah, that does feel better. Like, that does feel better. So there are a lot of like back and forth that we can have where we're like, hey, this is really kind of conflicting with the story and player motivations. And the team was very open to seeing those changes, meaning like, let's give the player a moment to breathe, a moment to explore, and then get back into the heavy stuff.
There's a gulf between I wrote this and it seems like a good idea, and then I built it and it doesn't quite work that way.
Right.
And having that two-way communication seems integral, like very important.
Yeah.
Scott, how do you feel in a Borderlands game, or where do you feel is the intersection of art and story?
That's tricky. I mean, it's tricky because just like Kate is saying, like, oh, this should come before this, and in play you're like, oh, that doesn't work, right? And art's a lot of the same way, right? And it all takes time and it takes effort. It has to get in there. But I think to me, they should work harmoniously together. But as we know, as Brock could all too well tell you, is sometimes something's done before something else is done, and you're stuck with whatever that thing is, and it has to either get moved around, like Kate said, or this, or we built this thing that represented this, and now that doesn't exist anymore. Right. Now we've got this ballista that is just an expensive asset
we just made a thing
that we just made, and now it's just there, and we've got to figure out.
Yeah, someone make a mission with a ballista.
Pretty much, right? Like, why did we make all these bespoke things for this thing that wasn't really tested? But it's like, I think that art's whole job is to, work in tandem with story to present the tone and the atmosphere and present the game, right? I feel like it's definitely the environment and the visual it's different than a film, right? A film tells you everything. Well, I mean, if it's like
shows
Lynch,
you, tells you.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, it's paced in a very specific way that the author has said. But in our game, we could be like, what's that?
Right.
What's over there? Well, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do this. So you can't always, this reveal is going to look sick. But no, it's not, because the guy's like looking the other way. He fell off the cliff.
Also, it's a co-op game.
Yeah,
only
it's
one
a
of
co-op
us
game.
saw it, right?
Only one of us saw it. And I think that you have to... That's a hard question. It's hard.
I'm glad I got you.
I mean, it feels like everywhere. This is where a story intersects with the art.
It does. And I think most games that are celebrated for their story and their art are typically very, like, they're very single player focused, like a BioShock or something, right? That's very, like, the environmental storytelling is telling the parts of the story that the words aren't telling. And we do, I think in a Borderlands game, you do the best for that, but let's be honest, the footprint of the amount of space in a Borderlands game is largely different than a BioShock game. Or insert your favorite, like, narrative-driven game, like Last of Us or something, and it's like, you have to pick and choose your battles and where you tell a story or where you present this. And we would always try our best to, and this depended on when assets and things were ready. Was the script ready for this part? Did we know this was going to happen? Oh, we got to flip the switch in the electrical room. Like, do we have an electrical room? Do we have a sign that points somebody to the electrical room?
Do you ever go back and go, hey, narrative team, we don't have an electrical room.
Oh, dude.
Can it be a payphone or something?
Well, absolutely. What I think people need to really realize from, like, a fan or the outside, like a person that enjoys video games and then understanding of what goes into them. I mean, it's all, you know what I mean? It's all a handshake between people. It's like, dude, we can do this. We can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, we got to remove this. We got to do that. And sometimes the art worked great. Sometimes the art got in the way. Sometimes the art confused. Sometimes the story and it wasn't really anybody's fault. It was just that.
It's a huge project.
Yeah,
it's so
unwieldy.
big. Yeah. If you knew you had 5 levels in the game and you knew that each one had 4 beats in it, you know that you could budget for the 4 beats and the 20 beats in the game. That's what we have to worry about. But in this game, you're like, there's 20 beats in 1 space.
Yeah.
Right? So you win some, you lose some, right? But, like, it's a real challenge, though, I think, to have art and story harmoniously work together. There's very few games that I can point to that say that they've done that perfectly or as close to perfect as could. So,
do you feel like, from a production standpoint, are you looking at the story and going, hey, this is maybe too huge, or this is too thin, or this is too...
Yeah, I think it comes into, like, how you prioritize things. So I'm a big believer in, like, you spike the beginning of the game, you spike the end of the game, and the middle is if you're going to, I don't want to say skimp, because you never want to skip, but, like, you only have so many points that you can put into development, right? Everyone will see the beginning of the game, right? And people who've stuck with the game to the end of the game deserve a payoff there,
right?
So obviously there's a little bit of a valley in the middle there. So it factors in that way, like, things that are front loaded in the game, those get more attention from production sometimes, and then. I guess the other way is that, like, this might be kind of counterintuitive, but, like, so, like, I will have producers, like, during Borderlands 3, I had producers coming to me like, hey, you got to cut the mansion. You got to cut Athena's, right? We mentioned Athena's earlier. Like, it's a lot of unique assets for one for one story mission, and you come back for some side missions and stuff. But like, we don't use that stuff much again anywhere else. And a lot of times as a producer, you look for those things and you're like, okay, well, that's a great spot to cut because we get back a lot, we don't lose much, right? But sometimes but you have to look at the context of it, right? Like that's a big story beat, right? Like if sometimes it deserves more work than like you would think makes sense on like a balance sheet.
So it's a weighting thing. It's a small beat, but it deserves attention or something.
Right. Like how critical is this thing to the experience of the game, right? And like story factors in hugely to that.
Interesting. The story of Borderlands 3 has a lot of lore payoff for the whole franchise. We learn a lot more about the Iridians. We learn about their home world. We learn someone named Nereid killed them, and we'll probably never hear that name again, I assume. It'll just never come up.
Sure.
And that Pandora is the Great Vault. All of these things, they don't feel final. They feel like they're launching us forward. Like it's questions that make me ask more questions.
Right.
Is it designed that way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You don't want to have it be like an ending. You want it to have it just be a continuation. And so you want to answer some questions, but you want to ask more.
We also do that from a story, and I feel like also a mission standpoint through every Borderlands game, through who's guiding us. Borderlands 1, it's Angel. In this game, we start with Lilith and eventually Tannis, but we're also getting these lore dumps and guidance from Typhon DeLeon, the first Vault Hunter, played by our very own Mike Costner.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Mike's in here. Yeah.
He's actually in the room.
Yeah.
He's sort of a lovable adventure goofball, but kind of the most important guy ever. How did that factor into how the game was designed? Like that's a new storytelling mechanic for a Borderlands game.
Yeah, like kind of like the chasing the guy who's kind of been here already.
Like we're always getting echoes, but these are almost echoes with a purpose, a singular narrative.
Yeah. Man, I think part of that's probably a desire to have those echoes be more of a story device, right? Rather than like a thing you happen to be able to find and like it gives you some lore that like you could take or leave. I think it's a way to kind of get those more kind of in your face.
I feel like the other Borderlands games were kind of like, you're going to go here and you're going to do this thing, and you're going to go here and you're going to do this thing. And I think this was the effort to breadcrumb a higher level connection point. And we even did things like when you had the fights in the vaults and you'd go in and it was kind of this weird space and there was kind of this big statue thing and like whatever, like, and you'd dip out of it and you'd be back in a normal thing. And I think it was kind of the effort to tell a larger, more grandiose, there's a larger architecture behind all of what's happening here. So I think that was an effort to tie that together a bit
To me,
more.
it recontextualizes what is a Vault Hunter or why is a Vault Hunter. Like we're always running and gunning and looting and shooting, and then we find that there's this kind of
more adventurer
dumpy
side of it.
Indiana Jones guy, that's doing it for like different reasons.
Yeah.
There's also two sort of reversals with Typhon. Number one is that he's alive. That got me. I wasn't expecting him to be alive. Two is that he's the father of the Calypso Twins. Let's talk about the Calypso Twins. These guys have, well, first of all, before we talk about their look, I feel like it's pretty safe to say that they're the epitome of the worst of social media, the worst of streaming, the worst.
Like we all watch streamers. We all have streamers we like a lot, obviously. But like, there's also like that kind of stereotypical, like awful version of a streamer, and we really wanted to lean into that. It felt very kind of topical at the time.
It's vapid, fame obsessed, click obsessed. I feel like it's not lost on anybody that Tyreen feeds on her followers. Like it just sucks the life right out of them.
Literally is just taking their life force. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
What inspired the look of the Calypsos? Because that's some extreme design, I think, even for Borderlands.
So most characters in Borderlands are a product of their place, right? Like they wear something that relates to where they're like. Brick was got blue jeans on and he's got this, right? Salvador is, working class kind of like, from where he's from and so on and so forth. I think the Calypsos, I mean, we've had a couple other characters in the franchise, but the Calypsos were kind of the first that said like, I'm going to create my look. I'm going to create my costume. I'm going to be fashion forward. And I never really like those characters because it always feels forced. Like, I think a lot of games are like, I'm going to make the coolest looking character ever. and it's like the checklist of all the stuff, and it doesn't. They're not.
Your jacket looks uncomfortable. You wouldn't wear that.
Yeah. Well, it's like there's a difference between designing a character and a costume. And a lot of games, in my opinion, they develop a costume and they put somebody into it and say that's their personality. I look at a character as they are an embodiment of what that is. So the Calypsos, to me, well, let's be honest, like there's a lot of Antwood like influence there from Ninja and Yolandi. Like obviously went to an effort to present themselves in a way to the public, whether
an extreme effort.
So to me, that was one of the jumping off points to like, let's make them a little larger than life. I was a fan of Tekken Concrete. I was a huge fan of as an anime, as a book, and you had these two characters, black and white, and they played off each other. So that's why they have the black and white color scheme in general. I mean, they have accents and stuff there, but yeah, to me that was. If I was going to try to look as cool as I could in the Borderlands universe, I would look punk, I would look hip, I would look
robot arm.
Right. Yeah. I would go extreme with it.
Big sword.
I would push it. Yeah, Buster sword. Like again, this is so much of myself. Like I feel now I'm saying this, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm
called
really
out.
Yeah, because I'm like, yeah, Buster sword, like freaking cloud sword, give him that, you know, and big robot arm and all that kind of crap. So.
I really like that though, that perspective, because you're saying this is someone who lives in this world where everyone looks very authentic and cool and extreme, but they went, well, I don't look like that. I should. So they go on a shopping spree.
They're really posers.
Yeah, it comes across as like try hard.
Yeah, right? They're really like a psycho bandit is a product of the environment. They become that, right? Like they are that. This is like, you know, I grew up skateboarding. This is the guy that I went and bought these skate clothes, and look at me, I'm a skater. Nah, you know, like you just put the Nirvana shirt on. You got at Kmart.
Name 3 songs.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So anyway, so I don't normally take a character on like that in Borderlands, but that's what made sense for these guys.
Was asymmetry important to the Calypsos?
you just like defined Scott.
Have you looked at anything?
Yeah.
Kevin Penrod and Adam May, who had the misfortune to make so many of my characters, were always pissed off because if you look at, like, I have given a talk about this. The way everything is diagonals. It's from the upper shoulder to the lower hip to the knee to the foot. You look at it on rolling. It's my secret recipe basically for Borderlands. And what that means is you can't really mirror anything.
Right.
And when you're making a character, you want to have as much texture resolution as you can. And now it's like, damn it, Scott, like you had to change the knee pad. And you've got this knee pad on the way down, and you've got this here. And because typically, it would make an arm, you would just mirror the arm and maybe add a watch to it. And I'm like, haha, I'm going to add this big thing and change the amount of fingers.
But also all that stuff you just said that like makes the artist be like, oh, it's a pain in the ass. That's the stuff that like the cosplayers think is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it's the stuff that is the juice, right? It is the funk that you see, because I think a lot of games play it straight down the middle and go, there's my one accent. You know, to me, it's like there's 3 major components. 1 always wins and 2 support it, but they all fight against themselves to create the thing. So.
There's a line that I heard and stopped and wrote down because I felt like it defined not only the Calypsos and what's wrong with them, but also what's wrong with a world, with the Borderlands universe in universe, what the corporations have done, the way they've devalued resources. Tyrene says, bandits were the biggest untapped resource in the galaxy. There are billions of them in the Borderlands, human wreckage left over from the corporate wars. They're broken, but we made them feel special, only to use them as grist for the mill, you know? It feels to me like from no matter who our villain is, it's someone that devalues life. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the life of a planet, the life of wildlife, the life of animals, the life of people, there's a devaluing of life. Is the core of Borderlands about learning to value life, or is it about saving life? Is it
that's real deep?
Yeah, existential.
I don't know if we can be like a a shooter, a murder simulator, we'll say, and
That's
then
a really
still say
good
we
point.
value life at the same time.
Yeah, honestly, part of the game, like going back to BO1, like part of a lot of the decision making was that like, you know, you're going to kill all these people with all these guns, but also we want it to be kind of irreverent. So like a lot of the tone kind of fell into place around that, you know, and like, yeah, to your point, it's tough to like kind of come up as like the moral of the story is that life is
It's hard
valuable.
to take the moral high ground here and also be the game that we are.
Exactly.
I've heard it expressed by some of the Borderlands devs in sort of these terms, like you as a Vault Hunter are never seeking to cause harm, but when harm comes your way, you respond in kind,
right.
sort of.
Exactly.
Your villains are seeking to cause harm on mass scale.
Of course, yeah.
So maybe moral high ground, maybe
At least moral
not.
middle ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Children of the Vault are Calypso cult. They feel to me like sort of the worst intersection of a doomsday cult and a cult of personality, which I don't know. I don't know if we're living through something similar to that today. I can't say. But it feels prescient in a weird way. What if idolatry goes too far? What if hero worship goes too far and there's nothing behind it? These guys are willing to throw themselves, you know, between their leader and their perceived enemy as just a shield. Like there's nothing waiting for them, you know. How does that factor into how the game is designed? Like there's just this. I mean, there's always an endless supply of psychos and bandits and everybody else, but here they are unified in their sort of doomsdayness.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's kind of like what made them scary, right? That's kind of what made the Calypso Twins scary. Is that they're like, you know, they've taken this, like you said, like they have this untapped resource, and that it's the bandits.
The Calypsos tell you to your face, this is our plan. We don't care about them.
Yeah.
And then they go on the mic and go, hey, guys, we love you so much. Go kill these dudes.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's laid bare. Like their fakeness is laid bare.
Yeah, sure. And you're wondering like how any of these bandits,
It's terrifying.
How do these bandits like fall for this though, right? Like
Yeah,
how do none of them
exactly.
like listen and understand what's happening?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
I don't know. I'm just throwing that out
Yeah, I
there
don't know.
that maybe there's parallels in
What's it all
2023.
mean?
Couldn't tell you. Rounding out our villains, I know there's a lot more, but ones that really stuck out to me were Pain and Terror.
Yeah.
From a design standpoint, how were Penn and Teller involved?
Yeah.
Or was it just okay?
Very
then,
much.
Yeah. How'd that go?
I mean, honestly, like, so I didn't join the project right at its inception. I was on fairly early, but like not right at the beginning. But by the time I showed up, Pain and Terror were already a thing. They were actually being developed by GSQ up in Quebec. And honestly, we'll have to fact check this before it goes out. But it feels very much like, hey, Randy's friends are Penn and Teller, and we want you to be in this game. It's gonna be really cool. So like, we're gonna work in a bit that gets Penn and Teller into the game, and that became Pain and Terror. And so it wasn't like we had like this spot in the game that called for a boss fight, and we were gonna make Pain and Terror. Like we actually had a boss fight that we needed to find a place for in the game.
Right.
If that makes sense, right? And so yeah, they were very much involved with their lines, like writing their lines. They weren't as much involved with like the mechanics of the fight, right? Like,
sure.
I mean, like, hey man, like we've had people who have offered their opinions and stuff like that all the time. They didn't do any of that. They were basically just like, this is kind of what we want our tone to be. This is what we want to say. And they were Penn's. Much like in their act, Penn's the one who does a lot of the talking.
Sure.
Right? He's always been great to work with on everything we've worked with him on.
As far as the design goes, did you just look at Penn and Teller and go, yeah, it's those guys? Like, or did you try and push it in any particular direction?
Yeah, that was, you know, the curveballs that are thrown at you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, guess we're putting Penn and Teller in this game. Yeah. But I think it was Manda who was Christensen,
right.
who was trying to visualize these characters, but we knew we couldn't make completely from scratch brand new characters. So we could do heads and we could do some attachments. Again, it's all a handshake between departments, right? Mm-hmm. But like it was fun to, all right, well, we'll just stitch his mouth, you know, we'll stitch the Terror's mouth up because he never speaks anyway.
I like the idea that Teller came into the booth and you just recorded silence.
You recorded nothing.
Yeah.
You had to get it authentic, right? So, But no, I mean it was pretty fun, and it was definitely again another
and
check.
they're
Not on my bingo card that day, so that's for sure.
Their roving base of operations, Carnivora, is very Vegas. They're very Vegas.
Oh yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I think it also takes the concept of what is a streamer in the Borderlands universe to its another further extent of we just kill people and everyone seems to like it.
Yeah,
we film it. That's very Mad Max. It's very Thunderdome.
Well, GSQ, who handled Carnivora and that section for the most part of Pandora, I remember, Brock, you were talking about when they came on, and I went up with Randy and a couple people, and we gave a big presentation to the team and said, this is the game we're making, this is what we're doing, and it was quite elaborate. I probably put too much into it. But then I was like, so what I'm going to ask you to do is to make the most Borderlands thing that we've never made and you've never made, and you're going to do it. And you're going to make Carnivora, and Fred Rombard, who was the art director at the time and stuff. And it was just a very interesting, it was real fun though, because they got to bring themselves into it and kind of meet that, like, because that was such a large character, right? The Carnivora was, and that whole situation, and it was just super fun. So
I wanted to touch really quickly on, you'd mentioned that Akira was a reference. Is the line where Reese screams Katagawa? Is that an Akira reference, or do you know?
It definitely could be. I don't. There's so many lines. There's so many things, and again, what gets to where and what gets to there, and who does this and that.
Right.
So I wish I could say for certain. But I can't.
Tannis in this game, I think, has some of the most growth that I've seen in a Borderlands character. She's out and about. She's no longer secluded. She's actually doing things out in the world. She dated a minecart named Kate. Is that a coincidence?
That was the writers. Okay, so there are so many like weird Kate things that pop
Shut
up.
up, Kate comes
Yeah.
up a lot.
Inside jokes.
So and the Shut Up Kate came from when I worked at High Res. I was having one of those days where I was like kind of in a bad mood and just grumpy about something. And one of my coworkers at the time, Eric Rice, was like, shut up, Kate, you're being too quiet. Because I hadn't said anything like all day. So because some of the people I worked with there came here to work, and then I came here to work, that joke just permeated through. And I didn't even know that there was gun attachments called Shut Up, Kate until the game shipped.
Oh my God.
I'm like, y'all gotta stop.
But
You bring it with you no matter where you go.
well, it is
though.
funny because I had no idea where it came from, but it's like, oh, everybody says "Shut Up, Kate." I guess I'll say "Shut Up, Kate" as well too.
Yeah. There was the time when Mike Davis we would do like birthday cake time, and he had gone to reception and was like, I have a request for my birthday cake. I wanted to say "Shut Up, Kate" on it. So walked into the break room and there's like...
Just everywhere.
Yeah, it's just everywhere.
It was everywhere.
So yeah, I think Danny or Sam worked that in at the last minute. I didn't really know until the lines were already recorded. And I was working on that mission too, so I was like...
I'm tired of being the butt of
when
everyone's
did that
joke.
come in here? Yeah. So I mean, like, and that's still carried on to the point where I think Drew in Wonderlands put in a Kate the Hate Troll. Like, it's just, like someone out there is going to be like, who's Kate and why do we hate
Why is
her?
everyone so mad at her?
I'm sorry.
There is one sort of striking difference between all previous Borderlands games and Borderlands 3, which is the hardware changeover from console generation PS3 to PS4, Unreal 3 to Unreal 4. Visually, the game, the fidelity, it takes leaps and bounds. More vivid textures, more characters, more beautiful environments. Did that hardware changeover? I mean, it has to have affected every aspect of development in some way, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Not only that, we also switched engines part of the way through development. And so, I mean, between those two things, it's like we kind of had to learn to walk again, kind of mid-development. And yeah, I mean, when a lot of the decisions made in early Borderlands were made because of hardware limitations, right?
Right.
Like, why do we do detail here and not here, right? And so, wasn't there like a concerted effort to move more more into the geo, because we could do that now. Like we didn't have to do as much work in the texture. We could do like a lot more just geometry. In the models.
It was definitely you could present more.
Yeah. But we had gone from we had gone from like simple geometry with like a lot of detail in the texture to then doing a lot of detail in the geometry and less detail in the texture, and it sounds small, but it's not. It's like a whole shift, right? Like you have to think about the way you do everything now.
Did it also impact was it why we got over 1 billion guns?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's so much the hardware as much as it is just the Gestalt system for the weapons has just really evolved over
refined
time. And we just kind of keep pushing what we can do with it. That weapons team for Borderlands 3 was like phenomenal. Jet, Jimmy, Kevin,
Duke,
Jen Chong. Those they were great. And it's funny, like as a producer, you have a lot of headaches throughout development, but none of them was the guns.
Right?
The guns were always going to be fine. So
did the hardware and software changeover cause any problems?
The engine switch was just momentarily
starting from scratch.
Yeah, it's like momentarily crippling is the way to put it. I mean for like a solid couple months, you're kind of figuring out, like your coders are going and they're basically figuring out how do we work now? What do we have to build? What do we leverage? What should we not use? What should we use? Right? And while they're doing that, everyone else is kind of like sitting on their hands, right? And so we did a lot of kind of game jam style things. You try to maintain momentum, like we want to make sure we're keeping sharp, keeping creative.
But you're expecting that, right? Like no one's, or was it a surprise? Was the engine change a surprise?
It wasn't a surprise that we did it. I think it was a surprise in how rough it was.
Sure.
Yeah. And so we had to. Maybe it shouldn't have been, but like it's one of those things where we definitely bit off more than we can chew. It's one of if
But you came out of it.
Yeah, we did, and I don't regret it. But I don't know if we knew late in development what it was going to do, I don't know if we would have made the same decision. But I don't regret making that decision.
Did it open up any art possibilities that just weren't available before?
Oh yeah, I mean,
dude.
Just lighting. Carl and the lighting team. I mean, what we could do with the lighting that was so much better. The thing is people think because the game is stylized, it's simple and easy to make. It actually almost doubles all the creation time for everything. I've heard a lot of people say the art style was a Band-Aid. It kind of was, but it also is way harder to do than it is to do like more. If the game was more photoreal, it would have been easier to build.
Sure.
It would have been easier to make. The artist's hand is everywhere in that stuff, and more resolution means more detail. And it means more obsession, and it means more.
Dude, we spent so much time on inks, ink outlines with the engine, so we could do a lot more.
The post-process stuff and everything across there. There's a lot of we're fans of Unreal, and each iteration puts a lot more tools, but it also puts a lot more options.
Right.
Well, and almost like every time you have a new engine that has like a new functionality, that means you need like a new expert, like you need somebody on the team who understands that very well.
Materials, PBR, physically based rendering, and
perhaps Blue Ribbon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of that was consumed as well, but like. All of that stuff was just another checklist. It was another piece. It was another thing. It was stylistically, is this Borderlands? Do we lean into this? Do we not lean into this?
Right.
I could talk for hours just about those decisions.
And it's fun new tools too. So it's really easy to go really far and then having to walk back because, okay, not only do we want this to look cool, but we also want it to run.
Yeah. And we have to ship it, right? Like, you can't melt your computer.
Yeah.
Right. All right, Kate, let's talk about Grace's birthday party. Just confess whatever you want to.
Okay, so I started talking about this a little bit earlier, but like my original pitch for the story was, okay, you're invited to this birthday party, you have to go get the birthday present or whatever, and then you show up and you just realize the child's dead.
Uh-huh.
And that was the whole mission. That was my whole initial pitch. And then Connor came back. He's like, what if there's like a whole party that you participate in? And there's like games and there's, her records, like her little like training records. And how do we make the player like decide if they want to engage with that or not? So that was fun.
That was fun.
It sounds fun. Yeah.
Just doing a dead girl's birthday party, just a good old time, singing songs.
I wanted it to be like one of those twists, right? Where you think you know what you're doing, where it's just like another fetch quest and you start out and you go do whatever.
The twist is that you find out she's dead almost immediately, and then you just keep going, like you're saying. You're drugged through the saddest birthday party in human history. So
yeah, I mean, so I had
the smile
that
on your
mission.
face is not right.
Hi, my name is Haitlin. Well, I had that, and I had a mission where we kind of delved into Angel's backstory too a little bit. So it was like anytime they wanted a mission to like hurt people in the fields, it was, oh yeah, give that to Kate. Kate likes doing that.
Hey, Kate, you want some more tragedy? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Let's talk about the false ending.
Oh,
How
yeah.
did this come about?
That was a Randy thing. Like from very early on, he's like, we were gonna fake him out with the ending. We're gonna end the game. It's gonna count down, and then there's gonna be a whole nother act. And people are gonna they're gonna think the game's over. The game will have been long enough that it's over, but we're gonna surprise them with there's more games. Like remember at the end of Symphony of the Night when there's like a whole other castle, like that. And I'm like, man, that's a lot of work for a gag.
April Johnson, our producer, said they could hear testers yelling from down the hall when they got to the fake
that's
ending.
the thing is like we got to like the part of the project where we're like user testing, and people got to that point, and they were so excited. Like Randy was right. They were so excited there was more game there, and not like a little bit more game. It was like several hours more game.
It's particularly brutal that it's like we'll return in
3.
4. It's
Yeah,
4.
3, 2,
2,
1.
1.
Yeah, no, a lot went into that bit, but it was honestly like it kind of jumped forth, fully formed almost as an idea.
Yeah. That's interesting. Borderlands 3 has 2 unique aspects to the Borderlands franchise. First, the EchoCast Twitch extension, where players could acquire loot while watching their favorite streamers play the game. Was that developed early on, or was that?
No, that was kind of midway through, and that was. It's very rare that I can say, hey, this feature was driven like by a person, right? Like it was like this person did this, and if it wasn't for this person, that thing would have never happened. Scott Velasquez, who is I think our tech director up in publishing now, is like he kind of saw that this is a thing that we could make. It's a thing that we're able to do. It's like thematically in line with the game.
He championed it the whole way.
Yeah, and he was like, we have to do this. We must do this. And he like just dragged it across the finish line. Like we gave him a budget. He went and found his own contractors. Like he built the team that did it. And like it was, I mean, I don't feel like it's that wrong to say that thing was like years ahead of its time, man. That was a robust Twitch extension, and now we're like, well, are we going to make any more Twitch extensions for our games? Like probably, because Scott like showed us we have to.
The other is Borderlands Science, which is also led by our software team in Quebec. A puzzle game within Borderlands 3 that benefits real-world scientific communities as you play by allowing you to help map the human gut biome. That's so specific. Were we approached by them, or did we approach them?
Randy really loved the idea of a citizen science kind of initiative, right? Where like players could interact with something and that could like feed into like a greater good. Do you remember PlayStation Home? They did like this. It was like this like kind of like virtual like living space on PS3. Does anyone remember this?
I do remember.
They had this thing called Folding at Home, where basically like players were doing, and like they were doing protein folds, right? And that was like being pumped into a database at some university, and they were using it for cancer research. So it started off as like, hey, we could do something like that. And so Randy gave this mission to the Quebec team, and a lot of it was. We have an idea, but we don't know exactly what the science should be. Like what's our cause going to be? They took it to McGill University up in Montreal, and they were very excited to have anybody want to do something like this. And they kind of paired us up with somebody whose research really needed to happen, right? Microbiome, like kind of gut research. It was like
research to help with diabetes, obesity, depression, anxiety.
Yeah. It turns out like your gut biome controls like a lot of your personality and like not personality, but like a lot of your like mood, and like just a lot more than you'd think. And so they kind of put us in touch with the right department at the university, and then the rest from there is the Quebec team cranking out a really cool like puzzle game.
I mean, over 140 million puzzles solved, over 4 million players solving a puzzle, and 169 years in-game time spent solving puzzles.
Wow, geez, I actually didn't hear that. That's crazy.
The cumulative numbers for Borderlands Science are unmatched in citizen science, and there are 10 physical Borderlands Science arcade cabinets around the globe. One's in our kitchen.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. It's a really cool thing, and sometimes you'll make content and like for post launch or whatever, and you definitely want to have a budget that's coming from, right? And it's weird when you're making something like that you don't plan on selling, right? Like that's just going to be free, right? I felt really good that I worked for a place that like wanted to like kind of go out of pocket.
We're
for something
basically
like that.
saying we're going to give you millions of researchers.
Because this is a thing we could do, so like we probably should.
Why not?
Yeah.
Let's get to our trivia section. Borderlands 3 trivia. You didn't know this was coming. Everyone made a face. There is a legendary Malawan sniper rifle called the Krakatoa, which is a reference to what animated show?
Akira.
I would have assumed it was a reference to Krakatoa, the volcano.
Right, you would, right?
Sure.
Apparently, because the info card says "Get him angry and he's bound to erupt." It's a SpongeBob
the
reference.
red text. Got it.
Yep,
All
yep,
right,
yep.
Yeah.
Okay. In June 2019, Gearbox invited Trevor Eastman, a Borderlands fan with terminal cancer, to play a preview build of BL3, and he got to name a weapon. Does anyone know what he named the weapon?
I don't remember. I do remember.
I
do remember that.
I remember this.
I remember.
I remember
it.
James and
Yeah.
Noel going out there with a kit and bringing it to him to play, but I don't remember.
I don't.
The Trevinator is a gun that appears in the game. Speaking of posters around the environments, Maya's Wanted poster has a price and a crime. Does anyone know what her bounty and crime are? Man, I'm stumped in the
Oh
law.
my gosh, no.
It's been so long.
Is anyone good at this?
No.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
gonna
no,
say.
no, no,
All right, that makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Pretty much no one gets any of them.
Good.
Yeah,
All right.
The price on her head, $720 billion. Her crime is being a siren. Last one. Y'all are going to get this one. This is the easy one. Reese's favorite theme park.
Oh man.
Come on.
Dude,
This is the low-hangingest of fruit.
why am I like? Why do I know so much about this franchise, but I don't know anything?
Dude, the
about
funny
it?
thing is, honestly, a lot of the shipping stuff, like you said Athena's earlier, and I was like, thank God, because I only remembered it as Monastery. Like I don't ever remember what we call
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
You know?
Well, and I'm also terrible too, because sometimes if I don't remember like a tiny piece of the lore and I can't find it on the wiki, I will ask some of my friends who are like super fans.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll message them on Facebook.
Like,
be
shouldn't you know?
Hey,
I should.
what is this one thing?
Yeah.
And they're all like, oh yeah, here's 18 paragraphs
yeah.
of lore. And I'm like, thank you.
My non-work friends get so disappointed that I just don't know everything about Borderlands. And like, there's so much to know, man.
Well, his favorite theme park, which was destroyed by Katagawa's laser, is Lazy Riverland.
Lazy River.
Oh.
Okay.
Our last segment, and I'm going to throw you another curveball here. Everyone has to do their best, Marcus, saying, so you want to hear a podcast, eh?
All right.
All right? All right? All right? Who wants to go first? You shook your head.
Sure.
Give it to me, Bronk.
Okay. So you want to hear a podcast?
Not bad. Not bad.
Thanks.
Who's next?
I'll go, I guess.
Yeah.
So you want to hear a podcast, eh?
That's the one.
good.
That's the one to beat.
Yeah, that's good.
Kate,
She's got it.
Jesus H.
bring us home.
Yeah.
So you want to hear a podcast?
That's it.
Yeah.
I like that
Winner,
one.
winner.
There you go.
Oh my goodness! You know why you got it? Because you put this thing, whatever that is, you did it.
The
Yeah.
emphasis.
Good emphasis. Thanks for joining us, Vault Hunters. If you have an annuity and you need cash now, subscribe to the audio version of Echoes from the Borderlands, wherever podcasts are available. If you get long-term payments and you need cash now, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/GearboxOfficial to see future episodes. If you play video games, and who doesn't, and you'd like to get every current Borderlands game at one great price, go snag our new bundle, the Borderlands Collection Pandoras Box. It's available now on PS5, Xbox, and PC. Also on PS4. Huge thanks to my guests, Chris Brock, Kate Pitstick, and Scott Kester, as well as our behind-the-scenes heroes, April Johnson, Dakota Warren, Matthew Ward, Rob Fernandez, Mark Petty, Mike Cosner, and Hannah Terry. Our theme song is Get Out of My Head by Wandermind. For Echoes from the Borderlands, I'm Joel Watson. See you next time, Vault Hunters.